welcome everybody here today. I always consider this an important meeting because of our joint gathering. So we have the Norton Historical Society and the Norton Land Preservation Society. And the Norton Historical Society preserves our history, and the Land Preservation Society preserves our future. So they gather land that they set aside that will always be able to be used by the citizens of Norton. And we try to gather in all the artifacts and little bits and pieces that made our history. So it's always exciting for me that the two of us get together for this meeting. As always, we'll start the meeting by saluting the flag. So we could all rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ellen, if you would do the Secretary's report, please. Okay.
The Norton Historical Society meeting on April 14, 2024. President Janice Burkhart opened the meeting at 2 p.m. with a pledge of allegiance to a full house of 48 attendees. Jan outlined the current business of the Society. Tickets are available at the Society for the John Adams production at the Norton High School on April 21st. New fundraising items for sale, including town flags of 3 sizes designed by former high school students Ryan Smith and Jamie Langevin. T-shirts with the logo of the schoolhouse or flag for sale were on display and worn by Bob Kimball and Dick Grant. Jan announced the May joint meeting with the Land Preservation Society will have a program of bird migration, past and present, and future. Dates of the May 11th Chocolate Garden Club plant sale and Goat City fundraising event with the Land Preservation Society on April 22nd were announced. Cape Cod Getaway Chances donated by the Kimball family are on sale. May 4th, Society Flea Market, $20 a space. Jan Burkhart honored John and Dottie Freeman with a plaque for the generous donation given to the Society. Jan Burkhart introduced Dr. William Hanna, who gave an excellent program about Camp Miles Standish, located where the Taunton Industrial Park is today. Only remains of the World War II era camp still standing today is a grotto, which was constructed by Italian co-belligerents. Dr. Hanna said 36 farms were sold to the War Department to make the enormous camp. The town in itself, including 5 service clubs, 3 movie theaters, an amphitheater, stockade, as well as a housing for soldiers and a hospital. Big bands and the Red Sox came there. There were 2,500 permanent soldiers and 750 civilian employees. Soldiers mostly arrived by train and prepared to go out to war. There were also 3,000 German prisoners who were made to work at some of the worst jobs thinkable, such as the Gellert Tannery in Taunton. Dr. Hanna ended his talk with an interesting story about one soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Kelso, who was a young boy of 13 who falsified his age to join the service. Served at the war front in World War II and also in Vietnam War. Later in years, Kelso and his wife, Betty, were philanthropists. Meeting adjourned at 3:30. Refreshments were provided by members.
Okay. Now, the next order of business is to present the proposed slate of offices for next year and board members. This is a proposed slate, so if there's anyone here who wants to volunteer to fill one of the offices available, you just have to raise your hand and we'll add you to the list. Ellen, would you do that, please?
The proposed slate of offices: Janice Burkhart, President; Christine Carmichael, Vice President; Ellen McGrath, Secretary; Bob Lampier, treasurer. Dennis Gutman, term to expire in 2026. Joyce Gale, term to expire in 2027. And Bob Kimball, term to expire in 2027.
Okay, now we're going to vote on the proposed slate, but please only raise your hand if you're a member of the Historical Society. I don't want to be accused of stuffing the ballot box. All right, all those in favor of the proposed slate, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any who wish to abstain? Okay, we will accept the slate as elected. Thank you. Now, we have two plaques, one that we've updated and one that's new, and they are out in the hallway as you come in, so you might check them out as you leave. One of them is dedicated to Ruth Gould and to George Yell, in grateful appreciation for all that they had done for this society. I only wish that my friend George were around once in a while so he could see the things that we've accomplished. And I know he would be grinning from ear to ear. So you could check that out as you leave. I have a little thing to read here, and I hope I haven't left too much out. But these are some of the remarks on things that we've done this year at the Historical Society. It's been a very busy year. We've had a number of grants approved, which is a good thing, and they've helped us to print a lovely tri-fold flyer. If you want, you can pick one up on your way out. Kathy Zawoski designed this, and it's all about us, and it's lovely. It's really nice. We've also bought a scanner so that we can begin scanning our slides and our maps and digitize them so that we can get them up on our website, and they will be available for anyone who wants to come to the website and check things out. That's going to be a very big project. We also bought 2 new computers and a sound system, just like this. We've improved the grounds with a new driveway, which was badly needed because of trip hazards. There was old rebar sticking up out of the cement that was all crumpled. So that was a big safety improvement. We also have installed several brick walkways. A man up near Boston gave us a bunch of, I guess you'd call them architectural bricks. You know, they all fit together like puzzles. They were very expensive, but he was putting in a new patio and he just gave them to us. And when he heard that they were going to the Historical Society, he was pleased as punch because he belongs to the Historical Society in that town. In addition to that, we have been hooked up to the town sewer system. We have some new floodlights in the front of the building to light the building at night. It's a concern for us being right on the main street and with a lot of foot traffic going by here at night, especially if they've been down the street celebrating. So we want to have the building lit so that if something goes on, you know, people might see what's happening. We've received many new artifacts which we have entered into our displays so that they can be enjoyed by anyone who visits us. All the 3rd grade students in the town will be visiting the old schoolhouse in June. We will be hosting a meeting of the Colonial Dames tomorrow. We had a display of our artifacts at Norton Public Library, and we loaned some of our artifacts to the Salmonese School for their Salmonese Day celebration. We're participating with other historical societies in the Passport program and hope to welcome many visitors to our museums this summer. In anticipation of these visitors, we've developed 2 booklets for them, one for children and one for adults. And they look like this. And inside, there are pictures of different artifacts with a little check-off box, so they can go around to the different displays and try to find what's in the book. And for the children, if they finish, they get the honor of being a history detective, and we'll put a little badge on the back page for them. And for the adults, if they want to know more about us, there's a place where they can sign up.
Oh, they don't get a badge.
No, they don't get a badge. They already earned their stripes having the children. Okay. The Passport program is a very nice program that's being conducted, or I guess started, by Old Colony in Taunton. And Christine, how many participating societies are there this year?
The 16 this year.
16.
Yes.
So the premise is that they get a passport and they can go to any of the 16 historical societies. Even if there is an admittance fee, they'll get in for free and they'll get their passport stamped. So it's kind of a fun way to get them out and about to see what we all have to offer. So we're pretty excited about that. Dennis is the one who got this program going for us. We're making very good progress in organizing our many records and clippings into folders ready to be digitized. Also, our archival cards are being entered into the computer so that they can be available to go online as well. We've had a very successful flea market and we'll hold another one in June. 14th, is it?
15.
15th, okay. Don't come on the 14th. We won't be here yet. We're trying to plan an art show for the summer or early fall. We want to try to shine a light on people from Norton who are artistic. We don't know how to do this, so we're really working hard at trying to figure it out. We're going to put it in the carriage shed so that if it rains, nothing will get hurt. If it's really successful, another year perhaps we'll rent a tent and be able to do it for more days. The most we'll be able to do is 2 days because we've got the carriages to worry about. Anybody who knows anything about doing art shows who'd like to help out, please just leave your name. We have some nice t-shirts for sale, as well as our Norton flags and the Norton street signs, which have sold very well. Later today, we will draw the winner of our Cape Cod getaway. You have a very good chance of winning because, you know, it's like just maybe we'll have 75 tickets sold, so you got a good chance. It's not like the lottery with millions of people. And finally, this is personal. I really, really, really want to thank all of our officers, our board members, and our volunteers. They work tirelessly for this organization. And there's just not enough words to say thank you. They are such dedicated people, and I think they really enjoy what they're doing because we laugh a lot. We couldn't survive without their outstanding efforts on our behalf, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank them. Okay. I guess that's about it before we turn it over to the Land Preservation Society. And I guess we could do our raffle right now, shall we? All right.
Does anyone want to buy a ticket?
Well, I already asked, but I don't think anybody, I think everybody who wants one has bought one. All right.
You all sure you don't want a ticket? Everybody sure?
All right, I need a volunteer. Okay, Peter, come on up here.
Yep, here we go. All right,
I don't know, Peter, do you think your hand will fit in this jar?
Ooh, yes.
You
Yes.
think so?
Yes.
Okay, we'll pick out just one ticket.
Okay, here it is. Chuck Weverall.
Oh, great, okay. He's not here today, but Chuck Wetherill is the man who, along with his wife, rehabilitated the first burial ground. And they have come from Florida every year, spend the summer here, rent a house. Much of their own money went into restoring that cemetery. So this is a really nice winner. Good, thank you so much. Okay, it's Land Preservation's turn. Who's going to speak?
I'll speak.
Yeah, Dan.
We need to wear that.
Yes. If you're going to be just like Dan Rather.
Can you hear me with this thing on?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. We'd like to thank you again for inviting us and kindly sharing the furniture, and in particular, the goodies. Yes, we can't forget the goodies. We've had a very busy year as well. This thing is going to fall off. It's going to fall in my mouth. I'm going to feel it sliding.
Your head's too small.
No, it's too wide at the top and too narrow at the bottom.
Oh, okay, how's that? That better? Oh,
No.
no. Dennis. Help.
I can cry opening that mouth love. So, our year has been busy as well. I've listed a few of the things on the outreach, and you may or not have received this, but we've had a whole bunch of activities which are community-based. Stargazing at the middle school several times, and what we call gratitude walks on Thanksgiving, and what we call Valentine walk on Valentine's Day, more or less. And these essentially are family-oriented activities and well-attended. And I want to thank all the people who have painted the little pebbles. We have little pebbles with little homilies on them, and we hide them in the woods, and kids find them. They're like Easter eggs. And we had yesterday a bird walk, and for those who were there, raise your hand. What did we see that was unusual, and it was very big, and we watched one or two of them for a long time? The barred owl. And so I would encourage you to go, if you haven't been there before, to go to Edith Reed and just spend an hour or so just wandering around the trails and things. On my own Merlin, I picked up 15, 20 birds. So there's a lot of things out there, including ones I've never seen before, but they exist, I guess. So, speaking of Edith Reed, one of the major activities we've done over the last year or so is in conjunction with the town conservation organization, Boy Scouts, the school system, and a number of other individuals. We've reworked many of the trails connecting Finburg to Edith Reed. And for those who are not familiar with it, it's a set of miles, 2 miles worth of trails, some old, some new, interlaced and meandering and maze-like and wet often in their appearance. And they have new boardwalks put up, new trails put up, trails that turn out not to be in our land, removed. And so on and so on. And so that's the result of, I don't know, I guess 15, 20 different days where people have gone with chainsaws and hammers and other tools of construction and destruction and have put them together. So that has been a big, big project. We've also spent a good bit of time on the Henrik Johnson Trail. And as you know, that's the site we have, which is along the bike trail. And also on the Foster Reserve, where we've put new trails, new benches along the Wading River. And a lot of that has been done not only by volunteers in the organization in the town, but by in particular the L&M organization, which is a pharmaceutical company that has a large presence in Norton. And they have kindly not only donated money to help us with these activities, but more importantly even, they have volunteers that have come, 10 to 20 people several times. They are eager, they are talented, they are happy to be, we're happy to have them. We hope that continues. The other things we've worked on, I think that's pretty much most of it, but we spent a lot of time on trail work. And in particular on the signage, we've removed and updated much of the signage. And for those who go to Edith Reed, you'll see in the last week or so, there's a whole new set of signage and color-coded for it. And I don't know if I can flash this. No, maybe not. I was going to show you actually one of the new maps that Don Thomas and LPS and others have made in the last week, showing all of the trails, including about a mile of new trail connecting the two sites. What I'd like to do now is to transfer the speakership over to my good friend Linda, who will present the minutes.
I have a question. Where would we get information on these trails?
See me after, we have them all online, they're digital. You
Okay.
can download them using the woods, or you can download them and print them.
You can get them online, you can find them online.
Now, would you like that little thingy that goes around your
No,
head?
I would not. I have a loud voice. These are the minutes of our last year's annual meeting on May 21st, 2023. Dan Murray called the meeting to order and thanked the Norton Historical Society for providing a wonderful place for us to meet and treats after the meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting were approved. The treasurer's report was approved. The nominating committee's report was approved. And then President Dan Murray gave a summary of last year's outreach activities, which are going to sound pretty familiar to you because they're going to sound a lot like the activities we did this past year. Stargazing at the middle school, the Gratitude Walk at Woodard Forest, the Valentine Walk at Woodard Forest. That year we did an Earth Day activity at the YMCA Outdoor Center. We did a Norton Library display and 50th birthday party at the Norton Public Library, and many thanks to Ann Murray for organizing that. That was a big event. And we did a bird walk at Edith Reed. A summary of land acquisitions and maintenance, foster refuge work, trail clearing at Winthrop Dahl Land, work at Woodard Forest, work at Rose Farm, with the town and the YMCA Outdoor Center, Alney Land projects, kiosks for King Philip Cave and the Canoe River, which some of you know as a Red Mill, maps of the land in conjunction with John Thomas, the Norton Conservation Director, and those are on the town open committee site, and signage improvement ongoing on the trails. The meeting adjourned and was followed by a presentation to me, which I gratefully accepted with great surprise, the Outstanding Achievement Award. And then Marshall Martin, a member of our board of directors, presented a very, very interesting talk on the copper works on our Foster Preserve. Respectfully submitted, Linda Collett, Secretary.
I'd like to ask Dave to come up and to present the summary of the budget.
Hi, so Dave Henner, I'm the treasurer for the LPS in Norton, and we've received income last year of $12,500. And some highlights of that, like they mentioned that Al-Nilam's really great giving us volunteers, but they are generous. They give us a $3,000 donation every year, which is very positive for our income. Some of our members wrote a grant, which was successfully donated $2,000 from the Northern Cultural Council, and we got some signage with that and some trifolds as well. And Nancy Peach was our most recent, our only lifetime member from last year. So those are the highlights of our income. And then our expenses were roughly $8,500. So we're still kind of in the black, which was nice. And like our biggest expense was like we purchased a new computer. We need more updated software and hardware requirements to run our mapping systems, and we're developing our own maps and such, so we purchased that. And our total holdings, cash and CDs and such, are roughly $195,000 at this time. So, but a lot of that is earmarked from previous donations just for land acquisitions, so we don't see those coming along too far in the year, just in the future.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. How many acres do we own now?
That's a good question because it continually grows. It's on the order of 1,100 acres.
1,100
It-
acres?
It is pretty close.
Over 1150, yeah.
Over 1,150. And counting. Thank you, Dave. And we'd like to hear from Kathy. Presentation of our new board of members and officers.
I did create several copies of this, if you'd like a copy, it can run in, it can be handy to separate it. Yeah, just pass it back and anybody wants to keep it. I'm very happy to report that we have a total of 18 members on our board of directors, and I'll mention those who have renewing terms coming up in a minute. But first of all, the following officers have offered to take on the position for 1 more year, and that is President Dan Murray, Vice President Mike Greenville, who's not able to be here today, Secretary Linda Collett, and Treasurer David Henry. And I personally want to thank all of those for working so hard in those positions. They all are great contributors to our organization in many ways. Now, with respect to the directors whose terms have expired, there are 5 listed. I do want to mention that one of our directors has gone off to the real world and has a new job and is not able to be with us anymore. But Aaron Portanova has taken his place. That was Dylan, who most of you know. Dylan, what's his last name? Thank you. So the members whose terms are expiring as of today, but are renewing until May of 2027, are as follows: Kevin Cunningham, David Henry, Linda Collett, Mike Rainville, and Kathleen Ebert-Zawalski, myself. So I'm asking you if you, first of all, would agree to to accept the nominations, continued nominations of our officers. All in favor of accepting their responses? Thank you. There are so many LPS members here, I'm sure we met our needed tally. Likewise, now, for the term that will expire in 2027, beginning today, these members, I want to mention, by the way, Aaron Portanova has actually been with us for several years, working very hard, and so we finally decided he should, if he'd like to be a director, we should certainly recognize him as such, because he's worked so hard on many of our maps using the GIS system, and in addition, he attends our meetings and contributes to many of our events. I think I said he was not able to join us today due to a medical problem in the family, but he would otherwise have joined us. So these are the members that I just listed. Please indicate by aye or nay as to whether or not you accept these nominations. All in favor of this slate of 6 members, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? Figured. Any other comments or so forth? Then we're all set then. Pardon?
We accept the
The total slate of 18, yeah, okay?
questions, and I don't have to wear that thing again, we will move on to the attraction. So I call for the meeting to be adjourned by the second.
Second.
All four? All again? The meeting is over, and let the fun begin. And our speaker will be introduced by Deb.
I'm Deb Cato. I was an instructor in the biology department, and Jesse, our speaker, and I overlapped by about 5 or so years. Dr. Jesse Nolan is an associate professor of biology and also the program coordinator in environmental science at Wheaton College. She's an avian ecologist and a conservation biologist, and she teaches ecology and conservation biology among lots of other courses at Wheaton. She also co-teaches interdisciplinary study abroad courses in Ecuador and Madagascar during the summer months.
Sometimes.
Her research is focused on how species and communities of birds, mammals, and arthropods respond to human-induced changes in habitats and landscapes, including studying invasive species, habitat fragmentation, changing land uses, and climate change. She conducts research locally and throughout Latin America. During the question and answer period later on, if you want to ask her about her research in Norton, it's pretty interesting. Make you surprised. I'm surprised about what her research involves, which is praying mantis. In recent years, bird watching has surged in popularity, especially during the pandemic when people had to slow down, stay home, and spend more time outside. Despite the popularity of birds, the populations of birds in the United States and in Massachusetts have been dramatically declining in recent decades, while some other bird species are actually doing fairly well. The title of Jesse's talk, Flight Paths, Past, Present, and Future Birds in Massachusetts, will prove to be very interesting, I'm sure. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jesse Nolan.
Thank you, Deb. Let me just grab this. Yeah, would you like me to? I think my head's definitely big enough, so an extra large head. Yeah, hopefully not. Well, thank you all so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk with you today about birds, of course, birds in our area. And all of the pictures that are on these slides are from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, they're not mine, just so you know. Okay, so just to give you a brief outline of what the talk will include, and please, this doesn't need to be formal, so if you do have a question that comes up, feel free to interrupt me if you'd like. So I'm going to talk just really quickly about how birding has become hugely popular since the pandemic. I will give a very brief history as well about bird conservation in the US and in Massachusetts. You'll see that Massachusetts kind of started everything out with the Audubon Society here in the state, so it's a really special place for bird conservation. I'll talk a little bit about Alexander Wilson and John James Audubon, as well as our Massachusetts heroes, Harriet Hemingway and Minna Hall. And then I'll go over the current state of bird populations in the US and in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, we'll see that overall bird populations are not doing that great in North America, but in Massachusetts, it's more of a mixed bag. Some birds are doing quite well, others have been declining, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. And then we'll look to the future of current and future conservation efforts and citizen science projects and how everyone can get involved in bird conservation in the state. Okay. All right, first I just wanted to give this quote by David Attenborough. Everyone likes birds. What wild creature is more accessible to our eyes and ears, as close to us and everyone in the world, as universal as a bird? And this it rings true to me because you can see birds literally anywhere that you are, even if you live in the city, if if you live in the country, pretty much anywhere in the globe, there are birds around you. So once you start paying attention to these species, it really, you're never bored, you know, even at night there are birds, you know, so it's a fascinating group of organisms to study and to just appreciate. And luckily, that has been growing quite a bit lately, especially, you know, as I said, with the pandemic giving people a little bit more time to slow down and go outside, notice what's going on in their backyards. But even before that, Cornell has said that the number of people who watch, feed, or photograph birds has actually doubled just since 2016, which is incredible. And now 1 in 3 people in the US identify in some way as bird watchers, even if they're just, you know, watching them in their backyards, putting out a little bit of food. So it's really fantastic. I am enjoying that as well at Wheaton with my students. The ornithology classes are getting hugely popular. Now I have to run 2 sections. There's a birding club on campus. You know, there's just all sorts of projects. It's really great that people are paying attention, really noticing birds. And Massachusetts is really, as I said, one of the places where ornithology and bird conservation really started in the US. So we have some really famous birding clubs and organizations, the Nuttall Ornithological Club, which was started in Boston in 1873 and is still going strong today. It's more of an ornithology science type club, but we also have bird watching clubs. We actually have about 25 different organizations or clubs devoted to bird watching in Massachusetts. And one of the oldest is the Brookline Bird Club, which is very active, established in 1913. Anyone here can get involved in any of those clubs. There's now a Young Birders Club for Massachusetts, so those under 18, which is fantastic. And we see that the diversity of bird watchers themselves has really been increasing, which is fantastic as well, because, you know, stereotypically it's usually been, you know, mostly retired, wealthy white folks that have been into bird watching. But that's changing, which is great. So now there's a feminist bird club in Boston. There's Black Birders Week, which takes place every year. There's an anti-racist collective of avid birders in Western Massachusetts. So it's really branching out to involve more young people and more diverse audiences, which is awesome. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how bird conservation and birding got started in the US. So I'm not going to go into super lot of detail. There are lots of, you know, older white men, of course, who had the opportunities, they had the social capital, they had the wealth, they had the ability at the time to, you know, study birds and to spend a lot of time documenting their observations. So of course, when we talk about the knowledge that was gained through these European white men, we're discounting, you know, all of the knowledge that indigenous folks had here. They really understood that there were many different bird species, watched their behavior, you know, they had all kinds of knowledge that was unfortunately lost. And then of course women didn't, and non-white people didn't really have the time or resources to devote to studying nature in such depth. So with that caveat, we will go to Alexander Wilson, who actually was born in Scotland in 1766. And he was not a wealthy man, actually. He didn't grow up rich like a lot of famous naturalists of the day. But he really had great talent for observing nature. And this great talent at really observing the details, intricacies of nature turned into a fantastic talent in artwork, in drawing and painting nature as well. And he ended up emigrating to America in 1794 with very little money. So he did kind of have to build himself up once he got here. He was a school teacher for a while. But he always maintained his passion or his hobby for observing birds and wildlife. And of course, in that day, really to get up close, I mean, there wasn't binoculars, spotting scopes, all kinds of tools like that. So what they really had to do was shoot the birds, and then they could see them up close, unfortunately. So that was the way that they really got a good look at these different species and could figure out that there were such a variety of bird species, right? Because it wasn't even known back then. People would hunt like passenger pigeons and things for food, but they didn't really pay attention to the differences in bird species around the US. So Alexander Wilson did. He became fascinated with birds. He ended up being able to convince financiers that his paintings were good enough to be able to get funding to produce a collection of illustrations of birds of the Americas. And he said, okay, now that I have this funding, I'm going to spend 7 years traveling around the eastern part of the US, from New England down to Florida, over to Tennessee, trying to, find, shoot, and collect from other hunters as many birds as possible so that he could paint them. And he was very successful in this effort. He ended up publishing a 9-volume book called American Ornithology, which illustrated about 268 different bird species, many of which were unknown at the time by Western science. And he was unique in the way that he drew the birds as well, because he drew them not just as like dead taxidermied things, but actually in lifelike poses. And he was very intent on showing their different field marks. So what you should look at, which we still use today in field guides. If you've looked at Sibley or Peterson field guides, they still use sort of the same format of showing the 2D artwork, but then focusing in on what you should look at to differentiate the species. So he kind of started that whole thing. He also took excellent notes on diets and behavior of the birds and the range of the bird that was known at the time. So really sort of the field guide type of stuff that we still use today. And his artwork, some of which is pictured here, inspired Audubon himself and generations of naturalists afterwards. So Wilson is a really important figure. He has a lot of bird species actually still named after him today. And then we have our John James Audubon, which I'm sure you've all heard of, the namesake of the Mass Audubon Society and the National Audubon Society, which are two different things. He came, slightly after Alexander Wilson. He was inspired by Wilson. I guess he viewed it as sort of a competition because he decided that he wanted to surpass Wilson's work and actually draw in detail more birds than Wilson did. He was actually born in Haiti from a plantation-owning father, sugarcane plantation owner. And he was a little bit more well-off than Wilson. He was able to travel around and illustrate 435 bird species, so he did surpass Wilson. His drawings were even more detailed and more alive, I would say, than Wilson's, because he had the habit of actually taking the taxidermied birds and putting flexible wire in the birds to put them in more natural poses that he could then paint that way. So the birds are in poses that showcases some of their natural behavior, which is really fantastic. And his artwork was almost life-size. It was huge. So that was also really impressive. The bad thing about Audubon is that, yes, he did own slaves, and he was anti-emancipation. So, since that's been coming out more recently today, a lot of these organizations, like the Audubon Society, are now grappling with whether they should change their name to not sort of, glorify somebody who was a slave owner. So that's an ongoing conversation right now. Yeah.
I just want to know, is the 435 in addition to Wilson's birds?
No, he had a lot of the same species, yeah, just in total, yeah, that's a good question, yeah. So he in addition to Wilson's bird, had 435, and some of these were collected by Lewis and Clark out west, so it's not that Audubon or Wilson had to travel to the western part of the states, but the birds were collected out there and then shipped back to them so they could draw them. Yes?
And so Audubon was a trained artist, or?
Yes, yes. Well, he trained himself pretty much.
And
Yeah.
same with Wilson was just self-taught.
Exactly. Yep. Self-taught, which is also incredible. Yeah.
Is the Wilson book still available?
I am not sure. That's a good question. Yeah, you might be able to find it on a rare book collector's page. Yeah, it'd be great. But we know much more about Audubon nowadays than we do Wilson, right, or the average person, because Audubon's paintings were just incredible. Like, these are all Audubon's paintings. They really show birds doing their natural behavior in some of their natural habitats with the plants that they would be associated with. So it really opened people's eyes to the beauty of birds, the diversity of species in the US, and then a little bit about their natural history as well. So it kind of got people thinking, you know, you can't really want to conserve something if you don't know anything about it, right? So Wilson and Audubon kind of brought birds to the public's mind. Now, unfortunately, this kind of ended up being, manifesting in a weird way, because although people were paying more attention to birds, for some reason, in the upper classes, the socialites, they decided that the way they wanted to appreciate birds was by putting dead birds onto their hats, right? So they were appreciating them, but in not the greatest manner. And this height of, having dead birds on your hats really took place between 1875 and 1915, with this huge millinery trade where people were going out and killing literally like hundreds of thousands or even millions of birds to place on these socialite, upper class ladies' hats. And it's strange because it wasn't just, some of it was just feathers, like from water birds like herons and egrets, their breeding plumes, but a lot of times they would just place, little birds just directly on top of the hats, which is very odd to us now, but apparently, that was very fashionable. So this was a huge problem. It brought many birds to near extinction in the US. It was really easy to go out and kill a bunch of herons and egrets, especially during their nesting season, because they all nest together in what's called a rookery. So on a waterway in a wetland, all the nests are kind of together. So the hunters would just go out and shoot all of the breeding birds while they were on their nests, of course leaving their young to starve, which was absolutely horrendous. These are some of the species that were commonly shot and used in the hats. So the great egret here on the left, we have the now extinct Carolina parakeet, which they like to just, it's a beautiful bird, so they would just place multiple Carolina parakeets on one hat, and that was considered beautiful. When the egrets and herons are breeding, they get these beautiful special breeding plumes that pop up, and so those were very popular in hats. They had some special funeral type hats that would put like whole ravens and crows on top of the hats, so it was just really this huge big thing. Water birds like terns. So yeah, this was a really big problem at the time. And luckily we had two socialites in Boston and Massachusetts who learned about these practices of just killing thousands of birds while they were trying to nest, and they realized that this was horrible. These were two cousins, Harriet Hemingway and Minna Hall, and luckily they were of high social class so that they could sort of rally other socialites around them and educate the other women about what was actually happening and how terrible it was. And they were able to garner a lot of support to boycott this trade. And they made a big difference, and they also founded the Mass Audubon Society. Now, this was the first Audubon Society, which was really centered on bird conservation. Before that, there were ornithological societies, more on studying birds, bird science, but this was specifically for the conservation of birds, which is great. And so this was founded even before the National Audubon Society, which is why the Mass Audubon Society still likes to maintain their separate status from the National Audubon Society. And then they elected William Brewster as their first president, and he was the one who also founded the Nuttall Ornithological Club, which is still going strong in Boston, and the American Ornithologists Union, which is really important for studying birds and bird science as well to this day. So yeah, really important place for bird conservation, Massachusetts. And the work of these women and the others that they were able to rally to their side really, started the process of getting these two bird conservation acts ratified. So the Lacey Act of 1900, which finally did something, because at the time people would think that there was no way that humans could make an impact on other species, right? That we could cause the extinction of another species. We just thought, oh, there's too many birds. There's so many passenger pigeons, there's no way we could ever put a dent in their population, right? So luckily people started to realize, like, no, we are actually, making a huge dent. So in 1900, the Lacey Act was passed, and then the really important one in 1918, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, where all migratory birds, so basically any birds that are not game birds or birds that are hunted, are now protected. You're not supposed to possess any parts, and you can't kill any of these non-game birds, which is very important. So this was all because of the work of these women. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit about the current state of birds in the US and in Massachusetts. So a lot of the data I'm going to show you is based on these long-term surveys that have been going on for sometimes hundreds of years using the same methods and often done by amateur birders, right? But birders who, they know what they're doing, they follow the same routes every year. Really, it's produced fantastic data sets going back, the Christmas bird count just had its 120th year. And these are counts where people go out for the Christmas one. It's from mid-December to early January, and count birds at the same spots in every state in the US. It's very well organized. All of this data goes into a centralized database, and we can go back 100 years and see how bird populations have changed, right, based on that data. And that is during the winter, so that is not during the birds' breeding season. A lot of birds actually travel south to the tropics, like Central and South America. During the winter, they want to spend the winter down in the tropics where there's more food. And then they come back up for the breeding season. So we also have the breeding bird surveys. There's a North American breeding bird survey, and then each state has its own breeding bird atlas. So this also provides a ton of data on bird populations, going back decades and decades. And of course, now we have eBird, which is a fantastic citizen science app, which anybody can use. You go out and input all the birds that you see during a bird walk. All of that data goes into the Cornell, ornithological database, and there are millions of eBirders now using it around the world, producing fantastic data sets, which I'll show you toward the end of this talk. But based on all of those data points, it's not really looking good for birds overall in the US, right? So this was an article that came out in a very well-respected journal, Science, a couple of years ago, 2019, looking at how just numbers of total birds, so this isn't about any particular species, this is abundance, so bird abundance since 1970. And as you can see, there's been a drastic decline. We've lost nearly 3 billion birds across the US. And, even though species aren't necessarily extinct, their numbers have greatly diminished, and that's very, very concerning. There are many different reasons for this, the principal one being habitat loss and habitat change, but I'll get into some other reasons as well. So if we look at the different types of habitats that birds are in, they're especially declining precipitously in grassland habitat across the US. And as you can imagine, we used to have these vast areas of grassland prairie in the center of the US, and now the majority of that has been converted to, conventional monoculture agriculture, right? So that got rid of a lot of grassland habitat. That's including in Massachusetts as well. We no longer have very much grassland left here either. So grassland birds are really suffering because of that. I'll get a little bit more into that for Massachusetts. The other group of birds that's really declining are shorebirds. And of course, a lot of these birds, they like to breed along our coastlines, on beaches. They literally lay their eggs on the sand and raise their chicks on the sand. And as you can imagine, humans love to develop, and recreate along the beaches, right? So that is really restricting the habitat that they have and that they can use. Also, a lot of these birds migrate really long distances during the winter. So they have to go, all the way to sometimes New Zealand or southern South America. So that's a very dangerous journey as well. And then other birds, boreal forest birds, western Arctic tundra, they're not quite declining as much, but their numbers are also greatly declining. If we look at eastern forest birds, they're declining, but not as much. And this may be because with the industrialization of the East, a lot of the farming sort of moved to the Midwest. And so a lot of our forests have been growing back over the last 100 years or so. So these birds are doing okay overall. The birds that have been doing well and increasing a lot in numbers include waterfowl. So waterfowl have really increased in number across the US, and as you can imagine, this is because of the targeted management by hunting organizations like Ducks Unlimited, right? They put a lot of money and time into conserving wetlands and preserving areas for hunting. So this is specific species management. Also, our wetlands and waterways have been cleaned up, right? They used to be a lot more polluted than they are now, so that's a good thing. And then we have raptors, like ospreys in Massachusetts, that have really come back, made a big comeback. They were not doing well at all during the height of using DDT especially. They had really declined, like bald eagles, the osprey that we have here. But now, since DDT has been banned, those populations have really been coming back, and they're no longer allowed to hunt them. People used to persecute raptors quite a bit because they thought they were stealing their livestock or their chickens, but that's no longer a problem. And then you may have noticed turkeys around here, so I do love turkeys, they're wonderful. But they have been doing really well in Massachusetts. And yes, you have a question?
I have to see a couple of turkeys while out and about.
I know, I love seeing them. Yeah, I see them around Massachusetts. I always get worried when they're along the roadway. It makes me nervous, but no, overall they're doing really, really well. Again, that's because of targeted management as well. And they were actually almost extirpated from Massachusetts, but people reintroduced them. So they were brought back to Massachusetts, and now they're doing really, really well, which is awesome.
Would that have been time during, say, sometime in the 70s?
Yes, yes.
Because I never used to see them.
Right, exactly, yeah, it's fairly recent, yeah, the last 40 years or so, they were reintroduced. They were nearly hunted out completely, but then once the many populations were reintroduced around the state, and they've really taken off, which is wonderful.
Are they a problem now?
I don't think they're a problem. I mean, people find them to be a nuisance, sometimes, but they don't really cause any damage. They're not eating crops too much or anything like that. It just depends on your tolerance for turkeys along the roadway, I guess. Okay, so if we're looking at how the bird community has changed over time in Massachusetts, it's important to look at how the landscape has changed over time, right? Because birds are very much tied to the habitat that's available. So if we go back and look at what Massachusetts used to look like pre-colonization, we had a lot of Native American settlements, obviously, around the state. There was a variety of different land uses, so there were farms, there were, woodlots, there were all kinds of different types of habitat in different stages of succession. the population of Native Americans in Massachusetts was never as high as, the population of humans is now in the state, for instance. So the land use, there was less intensive land use, and the farming was less intense as well, which allowed a lot of bird species to really thrive during that time. But then when the Europeans arrived, they started massive clear cutting of the forests in Massachusetts. So the height of this clear cutting was around 1850, when anywhere from 60 to 80% of the forests of Massachusetts had been cut down and farms had gone up in their place. So obviously this is going to change the habitat quite a bit for birds during that time. A lot of forest species went further north or further inland to try to find some suitable habitat. And meanwhile, grassland birds really increased in abundance because they could use these farm landscapes. The farming also was not as mechanized, as intense as it is today. Today, if you have a hay field, you'll often mow it twice during the summer. I don't think that used to be the case. They used to only mow it once, so it allowed the grassland birds that would nest on the ground. A lot of grassland birds nest in the grass on the ground, so they need time to lay their eggs, have their eggs hatch, have the chicks fledge before the mowing machinery comes through, right? So that's a big problem today, but less of a problem back then. But then as the state sort of industrialized and the farming went further to the Midwest, succession started taking place, or the natural regeneration of the forests. So we started to get some scrubby habitat and then some young white pine forest. There used to be a lot of white pine forest around, there still is, but then in the early 1900s, people realized they wanted to use that wood. So a lot of those white pine forests were also clear cut during the early 1900s. But since then, the forests have started growing back. Now we have sort of the middle-aged pine hardwood forests in a lot of the state. We don't have much of the super old growth forest. But we have, a lot of the forest has grown back. So we have less grassland and less shrubland maybe than we did before. So because of that, some of the grassland birds that we have in Massachusetts are not doing that well. Some of them are making a recovery. So bobolinks are grassland birds. They nest on the ground. They only come up here during our summers to breed. They go all the way down to the grasslands of South America in the winter. So they go all the way to Uruguay, Argentina, southern Brazil, to those grasslands. So they have a dangerous journey to make. But luckily, those populations have been slightly increasing in Massachusetts in recent years. Mass Audubon has made a big effort to preserve grassland habitats and to work with farmers, hay farmers specifically, to try to get them to only mow once in the early summer and then to wait until August to mow again, which allows time for the chicks to fledge from the nest before the machinery comes through. So they're starting to pay farmers actually to delay that second mowing, which seems to be working in some places. The upland sandpiper, that's another grassland breeding species that travels pretty far as well, all the way to South America also. Its populations have really declined in the States, or in Massachusetts. It's only now known to breed at some of the smaller airports, like the Plymouth Airport, where there's a little bit of grassland. Meadowlarks and American kestrels are also declining in the state. These birds all eat a lot of insects, and you may have heard that our insect numbers have been greatly declining as well, maybe because of all the land use change and all the pesticides that have been being used for agriculture. So these species aren't doing very well. The northern harrier, which is a type of hawk that does well in grasslands, likes to soar low over the grass. You can see the white tail bands, very long wings, a sort of owl-like face, beautiful hawks. They're actually increasing a bit in Massachusetts, which is encouraging. Now you may have heard of brown-headed cowbirds. This is another grassland species that has a really interesting life history characteristic where they are nest parasites. So they never make their own nest. The females will always just lay eggs in the nests of other birds and then leave their egg and chick to be raised by the other bird species. And because they hatch first and they grow big really quickly, they're able to push other eggs and chicks out of the nest, and they become the only chick that's getting all the food from the mom and the dad. So they do a really good job at what they're doing. And because they don't have to worry about making nests or feeding their own young, they only have to focus on gaining energy for mating and for laying eggs. So the females can lay up to 50 eggs during the nesting season one in each, different nest of another bird. So they can have a big impact on our local bird populations. Here you can see a common yellowthroat that's feeding the baby or the recently fledged chick, which is way bigger than itself, right? But it's still feeding the young cowbird. And these birds used to follow the bison herds around the US. So that may be why they evolved this strategy of just leaving their eggs for other birds to take care of, because they had to keep going and follow the bison. But they seem to have adapted really, really well to suburban life. They like open areas, they like bird feeders, grass. So this may be one of the reasons also that some of our birds are declining, because they get a lot of parasitism from the cowbirds. Now, some of our shrubland species, it's kind of a mixed bag. We don't have a lot of shrubland left. A lot of housing developments go up in more shrubby open areas, or there hasn't been as much management like controlled burns as maybe there should be or there used to be, although they are doing that more and more now. But a lot of these birds like more open shrubby habitat, and birds like the prairie warbler, which is a migrant that just comes up here to breed, and the gray catbird. These birds go to the Caribbean for the winter. Luckily, they seem to be staying stable so far, their populations in Massachusetts. But birds like the eastern towhee and the white-throated sparrow, those populations are declining in Massachusetts, so they need to be watched for conservation. There's a lot of habitat restoration that's been going on in controlled burns to try to maintain the shrubby habitat for these species. Because right now we almost have like too much forest habitat. There's not enough diversity of habitats in Massachusetts. For the forest species, you'd think they would all be doing really well, but also it's sort of a mixed bag. So some forest species are doing well, like this little ovenbird, which is actually a type of warbler. You can hear it has a really loud call, teacher, 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 teacher. You hear it like, when you're next to any woodlot. They actually make a little grass, like covered oven-like nest on the ground in the forest, which is really cool. They're a beautiful bird. Their population is doing well. Things like the barred owl that you were talking about, they've been doing well also. Pileated woodpeckers are making a comeback. So now that the forest is regrowing throughout much of Massachusetts, some of these more forest specialists are coming back. But some species that have to migrate really far, like the scarlet tanager and the wood thrush, their populations are still declining. And that may be because of what's happening on the wintering grounds, not so much what's going on within Massachusetts. So it's hard when you have to worry about what's going on where they spend their winters down in Latin America, as well as what's going on in their breeding grounds up here in Massachusetts. The birds that you may not have seen while you were growing up very much, because they have really only recently become very abundant in the state, include a lot of these birds that are what we would call like backyard feeder birds, right? They love bird feeders. The tufted titmouse, the Carolina wren, the northern cardinal. They never used to really be seen much at all in Massachusetts, but with climate change and with the spread of suburban neighborhoods and bird feeders, they've really been making their way north, and they've become very abundant in Massachusetts. And species like the turkey vulture and the fish crow are also relatively recent arrivals to Massachusetts. Now they're quite abundant as well. The turkey vulture probably benefits from all of the roads and the roadkill that occurs in Massachusetts, as well as climate change. And fish crows, which we have an abundant population on Wheaton campus, which is really nice. I love listening to them. They have a funny little call. It's really the only way you can reliably tell the difference between just an American crow versus a fish crow is how they sound. These guys sound a little bit more squeaky. But yeah, they're quite intelligent. Corvids are super intelligent. They're generalist species, so they can figure out how to get food in almost any situation. All right, so current conservation efforts that are going on in the state. So one of the big ones, obviously, if you've been to a beach at all in Rhode Island or Massachusetts during the summer, you're going to see some areas that are blocked off that have some signage. We have a lot of threatened shorebirds that like to nest on our beaches. So the piping plover, the least tern, the roseate tern, the American oyster catcher, they all lay their eggs on the sand. Their eggs and chicks are very modeled to blend in perfectly. They're very good camouflage, but it doesn't really help them when there are vehicles being, driven on the beaches, or when people have their dogs off leash, or, there are all kinds of disturbances that can happen on the beaches. So that's why Mass Audubon and Mass Wildlife really try to set up signage and barriers to protect their nesting areas on the beaches. But this, of course, is very controversial with the public because people want to be able to use the beaches in the summer, and this does restrict some of the areas that they can use. We have other big initiatives going on, like this MODIS tracking system. This is a huge collaboration among universities across the world. And in New England, there are about 150 of these radio tracking towers that have gone up. And the idea is that any bird or bat or insect that is tagged with one of these GPS receivers, like this is what they look like, when it flies by one of these towers, it's automatically recorded there. So this is a really great way to get information on exactly when and where species are leaving to go down south for the winter, come back up to Massachusetts. And if you can collect their receiver, you can even find out exactly where they were during their migration, how long they spent in South America, for instance, the exact location. So all of this technology has been really important in connecting the wintering and the breeding grounds, and making sure that we can do conservation efforts across the entire range of these species that travel really far. There's also been a lot of habitat restoration that's been going on. As I said, we're now realizing that the Native Americans used to use a lot of controlled burns to manage their habitat. It was a great idea. There were also lightning strikes, a lot of things that would clear tracts of forest before the Europeans came. Now we're doing that a bit ourselves to manage the habitat, to make sure that there's some of this shrubby, pine barren type habitat that's available for these birds. So that's been going on, especially in Miles Standish State Forest, other pine barrens. Removal of invasive species, of course, which is a never-ending task. And Mass Audubon also and Mass Wildlife have been restoring a lot of old cranberry bogs and turning them back into productive wetland areas where birds can breed. Okay, and now the citizen science part. I think a lot of you already know about these citizen science apps, eBird and Merlin, but they're a really great resource, a really good way to get involved and to help collect data on the bird populations in the state. And even when you're traveling internationally. So both of these apps work anywhere in the world, and they give you a way to submit exactly the birds that you're seeing to this vast database that anybody can download and use to analyze for their own scientific studies. Merlin is better at helping you to ID the birds if you're just starting out. You can ID the birds with this app either through taking a picture, through describing the main size and the main colors of the bird. It really narrows it down for you because it knows what time of year you're in and the location. It'll narrow down what's the possible birds that you're seeing. And then it even has a really great sound ID feature that works well in Massachusetts. So you can hit record and it will tell you in real time which birds are singing, which species are singing. It'll light up, when a particular bird is singing, which is a fantastic, amazing technology. And it's really helping connect people with birds and figuring out, what's around them, which is fantastic. And eBird, because as I said, there are literally millions of eBird users around the globe, and especially, in the US, you can now look at really fine scale data like this that's directly from, citizen scientists uploading their data to eBird. You can see migration paths in real time. So for a species like a wood thrush, when does everybody report it in eBird? You can see it starting to go south when everyone reports it. I would definitely recommend going to the eBird website and playing around with some of their data visualizations because it's really impressive what you can do with it. You can see on a very fine scale where a species has been increasing or decreasing, like this wood thrush. So it's just becoming an amazing data source for conservation. All right, so now let's talk about some of the main sources of bird mortality. Unfortunately, this is not a popular one. But so I did say habitat loss and habitat degradation, habitat change is the primary driver of bird declines. But one of the other huge ones is outdoor cats. And everybody says, oh, my cat would never do that, But unfortunately, just the sheer number of cats, think about all of the US households, and pretty much every US household has a couple of cats or a couple of dogs. Just the number of domestic animals is mind-blowing. The number of domestic animals is now much, much greater across the globe than our wild birds, our wild animals. The number of chickens is just insane. It far surpasses the number of wild species. So because of just the sheer number of households that all have outdoor cats, not to mention, especially down south, maybe not as much in Massachusetts because of the cold winters, but in warmer states, there are huge colonies of feral cats, and they pretty much, completely rely on hunting wildlife. So, there have been many studies done on the impact of outdoor cats. Even if they're not feral, they still have their instincts. They I love cats. I have 2 indoor cats myself, but cats do love to chase and kill things. They do kill a lot of birds and also a lot of reptiles, mammals. They're just great at killing wildlife, unfortunately. So that is a huge one. This is per year the estimated number of birds killed by outdoor cats in the US. The next one is collisions with building glass, which is another huge problem. Probably all of you have at some point, heard or seen a bird fly into a window, maybe on your house, maybe somewhere else. If you multiply again the number of households in the US and all those windows, that makes a huge impact, right? So what birds are seeing is they're seeing the reflection on your window of the sky or the vegetation. So they see that reflected. They don't think that it's a hard surface. They fly towards it, and obviously it has catastrophic consequences. Even if the bird hits and then maybe is disoriented and flies away later, it likely will die because it has some brain damage. So that's a huge cause of mortality, as well as collisions with other things like vehicles, wind turbines. We love our green energy, but there's also, you have to make sure that you're siting it in places that are not along the bird migratory pathways, right? Because bird vision is just just different from ours, right? So unfortunately, poison is also a big one. So I think rat poison has really become popular in Boston and Massachusetts because of the warmer summers and warmer winters. There's a lot of rodents that have been cropping up, so people put out rat poison. Unfortunately, whatever eats those poison rats also gets poisoned, which sometimes is owls or raptors or things like that. Or other mammals that are scavenging. So it's really not a good idea to use any poisons. Also pesticides, are big monoculture agriculture, especially in the middle of the US. They use a lot of pesticides, herbicides, and that is not good for birds either, or their food that they eat, so all the insect populations that they rely on. So if you are personally looking for things that you can do to help bird populations, definitely number one is keeping your cats indoors, right? Making your windows safer. So I'll talk about this, but you have to put the stickers or things that block the windows on the outside. It doesn't work if you put stickers on the inside of your windows because the reflection will still occur on the outside. You can plant native plants in your garden because this is going to support the native insects that the birds are going to rely on. You can leash your dogs because a lot of birds nest on the ground. So not only in the beaches, but in the forest, like the little ovenbird, they nest on the ground. So if you let your dogs run rampant through the forest, that's going to disturb a lot of birds and other species. You can buy bird-friendly coffee, chocolate, and tea, and I'll get into the reasons for that in a second, or support conservation organizations. So in terms of collisions with glass, some of the best ways to help prevent this is, Audubon and the American Bird Conservancy. There are a lot of organizations that sell sort of reflective stickers that you can put on the outside of your windows. Unfortunately, they have to be fairly close together, like 4 inches apart, so that the birds will not try to fly through them because they are very agile. They can get through tight spaces. You can also hang just little strings in front of your windows like this so that they see them and they don't fly into them. There are massive mortality events that happen in cities along the birds' migration routes. So we just had a big migration, right, in April and May, birds coming from their wintering grounds in Central and South America, going up through the US to their breeding grounds. A lot of birds breed in the northern US or in the boreal forests of Canada, so they have to make their way up there. Unfortunately, the central flyway for these birds goes through like Houston, and then Chicago, and then up further. So a lot of those giant skyscrapers that are in those cities that have like the mirrored glass, that's a terrible thing for the birds. Most of these small songbirds, they migrate at night, and they really, are not expecting, they didn't evolve to have these huge obstacles in their way as they're migrating. So there's some mass mortality events that occur even on specific buildings. It's really quite depressing. But you can lobby those buildings to change out for bird-friendly glass, and then people can do that on their homes as well. So we have a project at Wheaton. This is one of my students at Wheaton, Caitlin. She just graduated, but in order to draw awareness to this problem and to help prevent some bird collisions at Wheaton, she made this amazing artwork that we placed. It's like the perforated vinyl sticker, so it's see-through from the inside of the building. This is Chase Dining Hall, but from the outside, it's going to help the birds to see the glass and not fly into them. So it's a really cool project that she did. And then, as I said, if you wanted to buy bird-friendly coffee, what you do is look for either shade-grown or Smithsonian Bird Center bird-friendly birds and beans, or rainforest certified. There's different designations, but there are different ways that coffee is grown. It can be grown in a monoculture in the full sun like this, or it can be grown underneath a shade canopy in the forest, which obviously allows a lot of other birds and monkeys and species to use that forest as well. This coffee is going to be more expensive, obviously, because they can't grow as much. But if you can afford it, I would definitely look for the bird-friendly coffee, because you're going to be helping a lot of our birds that spend their winter down in Central America. Okay, and then, yeah, there are just some really great bird conservation organizations that you can also support if you're looking to help. And with that, I will take some questions. This is not a Massachusetts bird, but yeah.
I have a question. The migrating birds, when they come back north, do they return to the same places?
They do, yes, yes.
Okay, so they can, we have hummingbirds that come back, and my wife and I think that they've been here before.
Yeah, they probably have. Yeah, they find a good spot. They find a place where they have nest success.
Yeah.
And where they know there's food if you put out a feeder or something, and those same individuals will come back year after year. Yeah, it's really cool. That's great. Yeah.
Any idea how the fish crow got its name?
Oh, that is a good question.
It obviously doesn't eat fish, right?
Right, right. It is centered along the south coast, the eastern coast, and then the Mississippi River. So it does seem to like being near water. But it doesn't eat exclusively fish. So yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. Yeah.
When do hummingbirds return to Massachusetts?
They're already here. So usually it's early May, mid-May. Yeah, yeah. So it's always fun. You can actually watch them come on eBird, because people are reporting when they first see the ruby-throateds coming up, and you can see, how close they are, which is great. Yeah.
So Jesse, you said the window stickers had to be on the outside of the
Yes,
window?
yes.
What about the strings? Do they have to be on the outside?
Yes, unfortunately, everything has to,
But
yeah.
what about that Wheaton mural? Is that?
It's on the outside. I know, it
It
looks,
looks like it's on the
right, it
outside.
looks,
Is it
yeah,
on the
it is on
outside?
the outside, yeah, yeah, yeah.
What did you say the material is she used?
It's called perforated vinyl stickers. You can actually design your own, design or artwork, and then just send it away to a company that will print it out on perforated vinyl. I guess it's what's used on storefronts, when you see like an advertisement on the windows of a store that you can see through from the inside. Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Another question about hummingbirds. Some people report they have like dozen hummingbirds zipping around. I always get like what I think is one family.
Right, I only get one family in our yard too. Yeah, it may just happen to be the placing of like, are they on the migration route as they're going up north? But usually, yeah, they are very territorial, so they'll usually chase each other away from a feeder. But out west, where I'm from originally, my family lives, there are lots of different species of hummingbirds, and they get massive amounts of hummingbirds sharing the same feeders.
I have a question about the Orioles too, because we
Oh,
never
yeah.
used to see them.
Oh, didn't you? Okay.
I don't think we saw them in the past. Is that, I don't think I saw them.
I know their populations have been increasing. Yeah, but they haven't. I think they were always here because there were writings from Native Americans about the beautiful orioles, and it used to be a good sign of spring, when the orioles would show up. So, yeah.
Now, migratory routes, I can't see a hummingbird flying across the Gulf of Mexico.
They do. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. They make sure that they pack on a lot of fat before they do that, and if they're not feeling up to it, then they'll actually take a different route and stick along the shore. But if they're feeling really strong and if the winds are in their favor, then they do go straight across the Gulf of Mexico, which is just fantastic. Yes, it's just incredible. Yeah, the migrations they make are, just incredible. And they can sleep, with half their brain, so they can keep flying for days and turn off, half their brain to sleep, which, I guess some of us could do that too, but it's Oh, yes, I'm on the Facebook group for the Stellar Sea Eagle.
I'm so angry that I missed it.
I missed it too, actually, and it was right near Plymouth, but we just didn't have a chance to go see it, and then it was gone, and then, yeah. But no, that brought in a lot of money to these little towns in Maine too, because there were like hundreds of thousands of birders coming to try to see these sea eagles. So, yeah, it's a good source of income. Yeah, yeah.
So as a scientist in our humble little town here, is there something that we should know about in Norton? Like things that have surprised, shocked you? Or,
Well, one of my students has been making eBird lists on Wheaton campus like pretty much every day during the 4 years that they've been at Wheaton, and they've gotten some really rare and interesting species. I mean, there are woodcocks, there are wood thrush, there are tanagers, just, yeah, I mean, even in Norton, there's a lot of really rare migratory birds that use this area, so. Yeah, the habitat's really important. So what you're doing for the land conservation is really, really important. So, yeah. And I used some of that land when I did my praying mantis surveys also. Yeah, so I appreciate that.
What was that?
I was looking at the invasive praying mantises. There's a lot of, they're called Chinese mantises that are not native here, and they get so big that they can actually eat hummingbirds if they catch them by the end of the summer. So they hatch in like late June from the little ootheca, and then they grow throughout the summer. By the end of August, early September, they're really big. And then before the first frost, they will lay their eggs, and then the adults die. The eggs overwinter, and then they repeat the process. They really do get really big, like this.
Scary, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see them at your hummingbird feeders waiting for a hummingbird to come. So definitely if you see a mantis near your hummingbird feeder, get rid of it because, yeah, that's dangerous. Well, I just kill them because they're not native, so.
What do you do, snap them with a stick?
You can just take some scissors and cut the head off. Yeah, okay, I don't want to go into too much detail. Or you can just freeze them if you want.
You just sit there and see what you do.
They'll try to get away from you. Yeah, they know.
So are there any native praying mantises?
There are a few of the Carolina mantises up here, yes, and you can tell the difference because they're smaller and their wings don't go the length of the abdomen. They end before the end of the abdomen. The Chinese or the European, yeah. They're kind of hard to tell, but if you look at iNaturalist pictures, you can see the differences. But we don't have very many of the native. Those are mostly further south in the Carolinas. Most of the ones you see around here are the Chinese or the European mantises, which are both invasive. And we were looking at what their diet was, so we were using DNA barcoding techniques to see exactly what they've been eating, and they eat a lot of native bees, butterflies, pollinators, spiders, so they're really, they catch whatever, flies by and they can fit into their mouth. So they're cool, but yeah, they can do some damage. Yeah.
So ladybugs.
Yes.
We also have an Asian population of ladybug, right?
Yes.
And can you tell the difference between?
You can, yeah. Again, I would recommend looking at iNaturalist.
Okay.
iNaturalist is a super cool resource. I think I forgot to mention it, actually. It was up there. It's another app that lets you identify any nature that you take a picture of. So it could be plants, it could be insects, reptiles, amphibians, and the AI that it uses will help narrow down what species it is based on what it looks like and your geographic location and the time of year. And then also other experts will be able to comment on your pictures and say, oh wait, no, that's not an American toad, that's a Fowler's toad because of this, this, and this. So it's a really cool resource. I would definitely check out iNaturalist.org online, and then there's also a phone app.
And 1 second, another question is, we have some local entrepreneurs that don't like mosquitoes. Maybe everybody in this room. But that mosquito Mike is around.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe Mosquito Mary, is that one of those?
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have any comment on them or what they're using to get rid of
Well,
mosquitoes?
unfortunately, anything that kills mosquitoes is going to be pretty strong, and they say that it's natural, but it's going to kill other insects as well. So it's hard because I know there are, some human transmitted diseases that mosquitoes have up here, like EEE and things like that. So obviously you don't want people to catch those diseases. But I personally would stay away from using mosquito spraying services and just try to use natural methods like not having standing water or, using bug spray and long sleeves when you go outside. Because anything that's getting rid of the mosquitoes is also getting rid of other insects.
And coffee. So if I'm trying to get a coffee, as far as the birds go, I want to be buying coffee that says it's bird friendly. If there's no mention of that kind of thing, like you got at 8 o'clock coffee, which my parents used to use, and it doesn't say anything about conservation on it.
Yeah, if it doesn't say shade grown, organic,
Okay.
bird friendly, rainforest certified, then no, it's full sun coffee. Yeah. Actually, I would recommend a local place. Have you heard of Dean's Beans up in near Boston? Dean's Beans Coffee. They source their coffee from Latin America, but only like fair trade, organic, bird friendly farms, and they have decent prices. We get all of our coffee from Dean's Beans, and it's really good. Yep, you just order it online, and they have like the bulk bags, which I definitely need because I drink a lot of coffee. But yeah, so it's a good source. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.